Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 162 for Monday, October 11th, 2021. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me as always is my friend Jonny, the Demon Lord Slayer, but also Pixarus. Hello, sir.
Hello. Yes, you can hear all about me slaying the Demon King and Joel's experience watching Black Widow on Disney Plus over at the Render Distance. That's the extended version of the podcast, which you can get if you support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/thespawnchunks for all the details and get in on the extended conversation. But aside from that, we got to talk about what we're doing in Minecraft this week, because beyond that, there is some news, or perhaps not some news. More later. For now, Joel, how is the Citadel?
So I have been working on, and I believe have completed, the barracks build on the Citadel. It took a lot of landscaping and someone described it on the stream on the weekend as very deliberate Minecraft play. And yeah, that's kind of how it goes. I don't just walk into an area and hit bone meal and take what it gives me, right? Like, I'm strategically placing bushes. I'm mixing up jungle bushes and azalea bushes, which meant like going to the jungle and getting some jungle leaves. And like, there's a whole, prep for this one little bit of landscaping, but it's worth it to me to have the tools that I want to use in order to lay this thing together. And so now both sides of the river have been stone-scaped, landscaped. There's a stone dockyard, there's a wooden dockyard, there's stairs in a couple different locations, little bits of greenery and grass kind of poking through where the cliff was a little bit too steep, for people to build stairs on it, that kind of thing. And lesson out of it is just that this kind of stuff always takes time. I probably did about a 3-hour stream doing nothing but like landscaping and like little details and stuff on the riverfront. But boy, does it make a big difference. Like, now that both sides of this section of the river in this area are completely done, right up to the bridge that kind of marks the edge of town, all the way into the other bridge, everything in here is completely finished. And it feels good. Like, it feels really complete. It feels lived in. It's got some really cool reflections when I use shaders in the right light. Like, at nighttime, it looks really cool. There's just a lot of, I'll call it like congeniality. Like, there's just a lot of it just feels together. It feels like a sandwich with all the pieces, right? You get the bacon, you get the tomato, you get the bread, you get the lettuce. Everything just kind of looks good.
I'm looking at a lot of lettuce in one of these screenshots. Let me say the screenshot that I'm sure we will have in the show notes for everybody. You've got like a kind of hill mounded up behind one of the buildings that's got a big tower. And leaves kind of growing up the chimney and stuff. I love that as a feature, because we were talking in a previous episode about maybe needing to get a few more trees and a bit more green space in there, even though it's kind of like, what classes as an urban environment for a medieval era. And I love the fact that you've got this, it's overhanging the water, it's got leaves and ferns and stuff growing up in there, and it's clearly on a slope that, like, nobody's going to be able to get, like, a rudimentary lawnmower up there to cut the grass or anything, and nobody's going to bother because it's just down by the docks. But that, like, splash of green in the midst of all the grey really starts to bring it to life. And I think some of the screenshots you've got here are just looking so immersive with just a few little extra details thrown in.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I thought about putting a tree there, but then also didn't want to block the view of the building, like, because a tree would basically block a huge chunk of that tower. And I was just like, I think I'll just go with like a bush, like going up the chimney and whatnot. But yeah, my new favorite thing is to do like kind of like a 60-40 mix of grass and ferns, and then bone meal them so they're all too tall, and just cover the entire hill with it. And then go back later with your shears and like add in like an odd bush at like 10 or 20% and just like have, like a full leaf block. And then obviously like do like hanging leaves and bushes and stuff. And I can't take credit for the idea. I mean, I've seen Scar and other players do great stuff with hanging leaves over the edge of stone rock faces over and over again. So I got the idea. But really effective. Also, really enjoying, being able to use stone stairs and stone slabs to kind of make something look less Minecrafty, like it takes the squareness out of things. And so it was a lot of fun to work on that. It took a little while, but the other thing that I like having in there is this new little detail that I've got going on, where you put water behind 2 stair blocks, waterlog the bottom stair, and then put a cauldron full of water in the front of it. and it looks like water coming out of a hole into the cauldron. It's a little stretch of an imagination, but it's so much better than anything else that I've been able to do with water in the game, trying to get it to trickle down into something.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't really have eaves troughs or water pipes, or you can't really have like rain coming down a gutter into a barrel. I wish you could, but like it's not quite possible. And it's the closest thing I've come. So just little details like that I've been able to put in various places around the town, switch up how they're done a little bit each time so that they're not just like a copy. And I just find that out of the corner of your eye, it just adds a lot of life as you're walking around. So walking through this area is really fun now because I've got 6 ways to Sunday to get into most places. Like I can go in a building, I can go down the stairs outside, I can go up a hill, I can just swim across, I can take the bridge. It's starting to get confusing sometimes, where I'm just like, I'll pause midstream, just like, which way am I going? Right. Okay. Was that the fastest way? No, I could have gone downstairs. Like it becomes a little bit too much sometimes. But the last thing that has to be done is I'm going to be putting in access to the towers across from the barracks so that the soldiers, if they were to live there, could get up on top of the wall fast. But those towers right now are just hollow. But that's just going to be a simple like wooden staircase inside. I've done a number of those. That should be pretty straightforward. So we're almost done in this area, and then it's time to move into like the middle of the city.
Yeah, it's looking good, man. And especially like I like looking at the top right hand corner when you've got it in the screenshots with the minimap mod you're using, because that as a top down view just looks really cool now. Like with the amount of like roofs you've got in there and a bit of variety and building up, and you can kind of see where the line of the river is cutting through all of it. It makes for a very cool effect. So you'll have to post a screenshot of like, you can get a full screen minimap view now, right?
Yes.
So you
can,
like post a screenshot of that if you can, because I would really like to see how that's all coming together from a top down view.
100%. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about that mod is just being able to look top down and see that. Like it reminds me of the Lego cities or the little we called them dinky towns when I was a kid. You had like little metal race cars. They were about 2 inches long, and your mat, you would roll out your mat and it would be like a street, like a city block of like streets and stop signs and stuff like that. And you drive your little cars around. But I thought it was the coolest thing ever to just look down at this world that I just rolled out onto my floor. And I get the same feeling with this, is that like, as I'm building this town out, it starts to have like this, like, it has like a medieval map vibe to it, I guess, because of how natural the colors are in the mod. But yeah, I'll have to take a screenshot of that. What have you been up to in Minecraft?
I have been working on a very long-term project on Empire's SMP. I've been working on the anthill, which I've already had to tear down parts of once, but now I'm rebuilding it, and the sandstone foundation has gone in so far. It's basically Survival Guide Mountain 2.0, where it's not as big as that project was, but it's certainly up there in terms of materials, especially because getting hold of sandstone in any kind of large quantity is quite a task, because you can't just grab it from somewhere. You have to take off all of the layers of sand on top of it, and if you're like me and you don't want to craft that sand into sandstone, there's more digging you have to do after that. So it's not as easy as setting up a stone generator and just leaving it running that I needed to do for the Survival Guide Mountains. But this is going to be topped off by some terracotta and some deep slate and a couple of the different wood types to blend some stuff in. It's going to need a lot of detail. It's probably going to have a few green bits on it here and there, but overall, I think it's working out pretty well so far. I don't have many good screenshots of it right now because effectively it's just a wibbly shaped hole in the ground at the moment, but it's turning into something pretty special from the perspective of the base.
Yeah, I like the way that it's like twisting, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I decided to go with a kind of a look that wasn't too uniform, and it's not necessarily been a man-made construction in the lore of the world. It's been a little bit more kind of shaped by the desert sand and wind and by time, and it's a natural mountain that the town is going to have been built around, which is kind of weird because I'm building it later in the development of the town itself. But you know, if you imagine this is a place that's been there for a while, they've effectively clustered their buildings around. Maybe the protection from sandstorms or something comes from them being in the lee of this enormous mountain. And so I've got a build palette worked out for it that's going to work out pretty well. And eventually it will have this network of tunnels and a bunch of different ways to get around it. You can come in at the bottom of the whole thing and then find your way up to the top via, paths and ladders and all kinds of stuff. So it's going to be labyrinthine and maze-like in there, but eventually it's going to be dominating the landscape of that area. And since everybody else on the server has been doing sort of mega bases and larger scale projects, I felt like I kind of had to step up at this point. So that hasn't left me time to do a whole lot of other things in Minecraft. I did spend a bit of time in this week's Snapshot, but it was mostly attempting something I did in last week's Snapshot. So I got the Strider advancement in Snapshot 21W39A. I spent some time doing that on a live stream, going for this advancement Feels Like Home, which was added previously, but was kind of difficult to do because it requires you to ride a Strider in the overworld, in a large enough lava lake, and the natural nether terrain isn't spawning correctly, so there isn't any warped and crimson nylium, there's no warped fungus growing naturally anywhere, so you can't ride a Strider without a warped fungus on a stick. There are two options for you at that point, as my comments section let me know. You could either find one of those Striders that's already being ridden by a zombie piglin, and there's a very small chance that if you kill the piglin, if it gets close enough to land, because you can't really get to it any other way, then you can get it to drop the warped fungus on a stick that it's already carrying. The other thing you can do is find a Hoglin Stables Bastion, because they sometimes have blocks of crimson nylium in the loot chests there. You can bone meal that to spread it, and then you bone meal the blocks themselves, and they can sometimes produce a warped fungus. So a very roundabout way of getting hold of it, but I did that on a live stream. It took about 3.5 hours, thanks to bastions being scarce, and I decided to do this in a naturally generated lava lake, which meant going all the way to deep slate level, and it was so far down that the first time I made a nether portal, it linked to a high enough coordinate in the nether that when the portal generated again going back through, it went to the surface in the overworld, because the portal at the floor of the world basically wasn't within range of the nether portal's like search that it does. So that was a bit of a setback. But then eventually my later exploration found another lava lake that I could link very easily to that portal and ride a Strider through, and we got the advancement. But there's a lot to it, and I expect it won't be nearly as difficult in the finished version, but I was quite happy that I took the time to get it, because it's quite an adventure.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. And I always think about this kind of stuff when we get, messages, or you hear stuff in Twitch chat about people being like, I'm bored in Minecraft, what should I do? I'm just like, there's tasks laid out for you by the developer. It's like there's challenges right in the game. And I mean, I'm guilty of, like, I don't even remember the last time I opened up the advancement screen. It was probably the last time I played a snapshot, if I was like looking to get a snapshot, or if I was trying to figure out, how the game pointed me to do certain things. But I would say that would even have been like not a 118 snapshot, but like a 117 snapshot.
Yeah.
As I was like trying to find, ink sacks, or like, trying to do that kind of stuff. That's probably the last time that I actually went through it. So
yeah, there's a lot of stuff to do in there, and I think it's very good if you're just like at a loose end in Minecraft. Obviously, it doesn't apply to Bedrock players, unfortunately, because their list of achievements is kind of something that you earn once rather than per world. But I've attempted this advancement a couple of times in fresh survival worlds and used that as a way to explore this week's snapshot. But I was trying to make a YouTube video about it, but I kept abandoning that because I made silly mistakes. I died in lava, a Hoglin got me. There was a variety of things that kept getting in the way of making that into a proper YouTube video. So depending on what we get this week, I might attempt it again, considering that the devs are potentially busy gearing up for Minecraft Live. But outside of that, I think it's probably going to be better saving this one until there is actual nether terrain again.
Yeah, that's always frustrating if you want to experiment in the snapshots, but then because of what they're doing, it's messing up some key forms of progression, like the end or nether terrain, or like there was a point there where like end gateways weren't spawning or fortresses weren't there. It's like that kind of stuff is always frustrating. I even remember like having like a snapshot and really getting going in the snapshot, but then realizing that you had a really crappy or really challenging nether spawn like the first nether update snapshots, and then you're just like, well, everything comes to a grinding halt because I can't get the thing I need to go forward. So it's always challenging.
I think it's going to be a really interesting aspect of 1.18, considering how different the terrain is in the overworld. Like where you end up placing nether portals and what you use the nether for is potentially going to change. So hopefully the terrain can be fixed relatively soon so we can get an idea of what that feels like before the full release arrives. But it's certainly a little bit better than the experimental snapshots where nether terrain wasn't generating properly at all and you just ended up with sheer walls of netherrack and like no structures generating, no biomes to speak of, barely any flat ground. But yeah, it's an interesting time, but looking forward to it and glad that it was at least possible to collect that advancement in the snapshot. Speaking of snapshots, though, let's get into the news and let's start talking about this week.
This week, we've got Minecraft Java Edition Snapshot 21W40A. We'll have a link to the Minecraft.net article in our show notes. This time around, there are some additional tweaks to world generation and a few changes to mob spawning. Performance changes in the snapshot have been ongoing since 21W37A, and a survey is now available for players to provide feedback on their perception of game performance. Minecraft Performance Poll is a forums.office.com website. We'll have a link to that in our show notes as well. Changes in 21W40A include that copper ore now drops 2 to 5 raw copper items, which is up from 2 to 3. In the stone cutter, a block of copper can be converted to 4 cut copper. Several biome variants with similar features but different shapes have been merged, and some biomes have been renamed. Under world generation, non-cave biomes no longer change with height, so no more savannas in the sky and things like that. Tweaked the relative size of some biomes to match 117 a bit closer. Increased the average size of most biomes. This also means biomes aren't in the same places as before. Fixed some aquifer issues. This also means that aquifers are in different places compared to the last snapshot. Slightly increased the frequency of underwater magma. Increased the amount of dungeons, especially below height 0. Gravel now generates below height 0. Villagers are slightly more spread out. Sorry, not villagers, villages, but I guess villagers too. Water lake features have been removed. Aquifers provide local water levels. Mob spawning. Axolotls now only spawn in water, above clay blocks, in lush caves. Glow squids now only spawn in water blocks under height 30. Cod, salmon, pufferfish, tropical fish, squid, and dolphins now only spawn in water from height 50 to 64. Tropical fish now also spawn in lush caves at any height. Zombies once again spawn in dripstone caves. Drowned can also spawn in dripstone caves. Goats no longer spawn in stony peaks. Technical changes in 21W40A. Optimized AI for axolotls, goats, hoglins, zoglins, piglin brutes, and villagers. Bedrock layers generate dependent on the world's seed now, whereas they used to generate the same. Bug fixes in 21W40A are mostly world gen related and are listed in the Minecraft.net article linked in the show notes. Minecraft Live 2021 Are You Ready? Is a YouTube video that Minecraft put out on YouTube. That Mojang put out on YouTube. They traveled to the basement of Mojang where they announced the announcement that we already knew about. They did leave a few tidbits that we'll get into in the news, but basically it's just the announcement of the announcement. Minecraft Live 2021 also introduced the new mob video, the cute animated video with animated Agnes and Jens and Little Vu, which I thought was cute. They also announced the announcement of the announcement that we already know about. And then Agnes fell.
So we'll get into those once again a little bit later. First of all, though, I want to cover a Minecraft Bedrock Edition beta that came out this week. This is beta version 1.18.0.20. We'll have a link to the changelog for that at feedback.minecraft.net. But if those numbers excite you, then good. This beta actually moves the Caves and Cliffs terrain out from behind the experimental features toggle in Bedrock Edition. Now every world generated in the beta version will generate with Caves and Cliffs terrain, much like Java Snapshots if you are used to those. This also means loading existing worlds into this beta will introduce caves below Y0 and blend any old chunks with new terrain generation, so watch out for that. Make sure you back up your worlds if you're at all concerned. It also changes ore generation rates to be more in parity with Java Edition. There are some changes to cave generation included. Old caves can now reach all the way to the surface, and the old cave carver placement is now on parity with Java Edition. Floating water no longer generates in caves, after that being an issue in the previous beta. And we have tough blobs and deep slate patches generating differently. Tough blob features now generate below Y0, and deep slate patches no longer generate above Y0. In terms of other world generation stuff, they've updated the feature placement of granite, andesite, diorite, dirt, and gravel to closer match Java Edition, tweaked peaks to make small mountains look like proper jagged mountain peaks instead of flat, hilly mounds, improved blending between old and new chunks, and fixed a bug that was causing mineshaft tunnels to replace bedrock. In general, players with higher than recommended render distance settings are now prompted to change it to the recommended value when they load up the game. The render distance default and max settings have also been updated for better performance, and there are various other bug fixes, performance tweaks, and other changes, including mobs now pathfinding over trapdoors, mobs no longer walking through campfires or sweet berry bushes, but sweet berry bushes now being able to deal damage to mobs. Raid mobs will now despawn after a raid ends if the player moves far enough away, and Vindicators will no longer naturally spawn as part of an Illager patrol. We've edited down this changelog quite a bit, but you can once again check out feedback.minecraft.net for the changelog with a full list of changes to Bedrock Edition betas.
So how do you feel about the announcement videos?
I think it's probably just there for the YouTube crowd, because this is stuff that, like you said, we already knew about. We knew when Minecraft Live was happening, and we knew there was going to be a mob vote. The mob vote video is really just a prelude to, it's like the setup for them then going on a little animated adventure where they will tell us more about the mobs. Potentially, after this episode is finished recording, we might get the first one of those. And so I might cut in a little bit later if we have a discussion about the mob vote video if it is released today. So keep an eye out towards the end of the show for that. But yeah, I think it's there for the YouTube crowd, really. It's there for people who get their news from Minecraft on YouTube rather than from going to Minecraft.net every week the way we do. So I can't feel too harsh about that kind of stuff. Although I did notice the Minecraft Live kind of save the date has started popping up on YouTube, so there is a way you can set a reminder for a live stream on YouTube that's going to be happening at a later date, and that turned up in my subscription feed this week as well. So either way, people are going to know when Minecraft Live is happening, and the mob vote is happening as well. How do you feel about it? I know you were looking forward to the animated videos coming back, so I expect you're at least happy to see Tiny Jens and Tiny Agnes again.
I'm always there for the fun visual. When he whips out the phone that is the size of a car, like yes. battery, like it has like Lethal Weapon vibes to me from like, I'm not sure how long it's been since people watched that film, but like it's funny when you watch like mobile technology in the late 80s to the early 90s. Mm-hmm. It's amusing. And to see like the cartoonishly large phone and just like, I like the fact that they brought in Tiny Vu. Have they done that before? I don't remember. I don't know if they've done that.
I mean, Vu has always been the guy who presents the mob vote at Minecraft Live, so it's good that they're including him this time around. Always fun to see more of the team in general, and yeah, it's nice that they brought him along for the ride this time. But yeah, like a little bit of comedy, and hopefully that kind of leads into, once we have all of the different videos, it's going to make a bit more sense as a little story.
Yeah. I think I hear you on the it's the other announcement videos for the YouTube crowd, and like they don't necessarily have like a podcast they listen to about Minecraft, at which point they should go find one. Do you know one that they could listen to?
I couldn't possibly.
No, me either. No, and this is not throwing any shade at Mojang specifically. I just get irritated by the general kind of like gaming, any media announcement these days. It's just like there's always the announcement of the announcement. It's like the 2-second trailer before the trailer that you're about to watch on YouTube. It's like I'm here to watch the advertisement for your movie. I don't need to see an ad for the ad directly in front of the ad.
Yeah.
It's your audience is savvy. They've been on the internet for a very long time. And I think a lot of us would appreciate just announce the thing. Like just say, like, for example, like this bit about Agnes and Jens, while cute, they could have had that as part of the first video today, or tomorrow, or whenever it's coming out. Like that could have just been all one. I don't know why they had to separate it out. And like, it's one of those things where I'm sure there's some marketing person that will tell me the statistics of like, well, if you announce it 3 times, we have so many more people that will show up and, click the button or whatever. Like I get it. I understand that there's some sort of metric. But it still makes me feel kind of like eye-rolly and old when this kind of stuff happens.
It's a hype building thing, really. And I think the main thing that made me disappointed about it was that we didn't get to talk about what the mobs were on this week's show. Like, we're going to have to save all of our discussion of that along with everything else that we're going to learn from Minecraft Live. So, it's mostly from a podcasting perspective that I get disappointed by this stuff. But, yeah, the other video, the kind of the basement video that sort of announces, make sure you remember the date. It's October 16th, 12 Eastern time. Did confirm that we're getting an update on Minecraft Dungeons, which I don't think was confirmed anywhere else prior to this. Maybe it was in the Minecraft.net article and I just skimmed it. But yeah, and it's quite clearly signposted. I mean, Laura is one of the Minecraft Dungeons devs. And has been in Minecraft Live previously. They had somebody playing the Minecraft Dungeons arcade game, and then when she goes down into the basement to find Vu, already kind of going through his script for the event, he mentions an update on Minecraft Dungeons. So it's clear that they're trying to signpost the fact that Minecraft Dungeons isn't going away now all the DLC is out. And so that's the main thing I took from that as an announcement video. But evidently for it being mostly information we knew already, I wasn't too bothered.
I mean, we'll dig into, I think, some of the details of the mob vote video a little bit later. But moving on to the snapshot, I confess I've been a little bit checked out of the snapshots. I've been watching like video summations of them and stuff online from our favorite creators, and I haven't felt the need to jump into them myself. Mostly because I'm having some technical problems with Minecraft anyway, and I don't want me having a technical issue to kind of taint my view of the snapshot or taint my view of the coming update. I do eventually want to try it a little bit because I'd like to fill out the survey and kind of let them know some of the challenges that I'm facing, which I think a lot of people should do if you have the time. I think it would be good, especially if you're not running a top of the line computer. Like if you're running something that's good but not a potato, I think that would be an excellent kind of middle ground for them to get some feedback. But one thing I did take away, which I was not expecting, was the fact that they renamed some biomes. And some of them are a lot easier to wrap your head around and your tongue around as a podcaster, like jagged peaks and frozen peaks. They make sense. One's going to be frozen, covered in ice. The other one's going to be sharp and jagged. So that kind of stuff I think is cool. Stony Shore, sparse jungle. Again, they are what they sound like. It's a stony shore. It's a jungle that's not as dense as the other jungle. And having seen them on video footage, it makes sense and it looks cool. And it makes a lot more sense for like a sparse jungle to be between a jungle and a plains biome rather than a wall of jungle just kind of ending, at the edge of something, which I think is cool. On the flip side, they've also gone into things like old growth pine taiga. There are no pine trees in Minecraft. There's spruce trees. There's also an old growth spruce taiga. I want to know what the difference is between those two, because they're a mouthful, and I bet you they look real similar in the game.
Yeah.
And then when you get into other things, like there's 5 different versions of windswept biomes. Now, some of them are pretty easy. Windswept Badlands, windswept Savannah. Basically, to me, it sounds like it's just higher. They needed something to tell you this is higher than most other Savannah and Badland issues, or not issues, but biomes. But then you get into like windswept, like birch forests, and it's just like what? Why do you need to, I guess, give it these names when it's just going to be a birch forest? Like I feel like they could be more descriptive, I guess,
Yeah.
and less verbose.
I would love there to be windswept variants of some of the trees that generate kind of like azalea trees do, with like all of the leaves kind of bending to one side as though they have been windswept, because otherwise there is no wind in Minecraft, so we don't really like we don't have a frame of reference for that other than it just being like, presume that the wind is happening up here. Although if that ends up being a cue for them to add, windy ambience to some of those biomes eventually, then again, I'm all for it. But I think right now there isn't a great deal to characterize things as windswept other than they're just being kind of tall. And the old growth thing happens with birch forests as well when you get those tall birch biomes where the trees are, 7 or 8 blocks or more tall. And so I've noticed that because I run into those quite a lot. And there is very little difference between that and a regular birch forest except the height of the trees. So I expect the spruce taiga is maybe clearing up the kind of mega taiga generation, the one with podzol and stuff, I would assume. But if there isn't any difference between that and a normal taiga forest, then no idea, really. There's a couple of other terrain changes that I think seem good. Biomes in particular, it says in the changelog that they are like a little bit larger, and that's kind of underselling it. They're about twice the size. And I know Henrik posted a few more images on Twitter and a poll about like whether or not you think biomes are a better size now. I think I like biomes being larger overall, especially now we don't have world customization options that include a large biomes setting, because it's good for larger build projects. It prevents you from stumbling into rare biomes basically on your doorstep unless you generate in a jungle. A lot of the time people are finding jungles within a short walk of their spawn point, and people are complaining that, jungles used to be more rare, and, this kind of changes up the balance of the game slightly. But I do like there being slightly larger areas to build in, because one of the most painful things when you're building with a certain build style in a certain biome is when that biome changes over into, a river or a savanna or a forest, and the grass color changes, and suddenly you think, oh, my whole build palette has been thrown off at this point by like just a tiny subtle change in grass color that actually doesn't make it go as well with the materials that I've chosen. So I'm looking forward to seeing a little bit more of the larger biomes. Again, I noticed that as I was exploring the snapshot this week, but I didn't spend too much time flying around and comparing. It has meant that old worlds, if you load up the same seed in a previous snapshot compared to this new snapshot, biomes are in completely different places. So I've generated, and it's clearly been the same terrain, the same cave entrances, the same mountains here and there, but they've been generating completely different biome wrappings to them. The paint has been layered on in a different way, and so I find that there are a couple of weird changes, and if you're upgrading from one snapshot world to the next, if you're upgrading from 39A to 40A, you might see there's a couple of weird biome borders wherever you last left off. Gravel below Y0 is super helpful in my experience. I've spent a lot of time with this Strider task, kind of going down to deep slate level, making a nether portal and realizing I had nothing to light it with. So I think having patches of gravel is going to be useful for folks who want to hunt down a flint and steel if they're trying to escape the deep slate caverns as well. You can build a nether portal, hop through to the nether, and hop back again to the overworld, and you might be in a completely different place on the surface. So that's not a bad idea, and I think having gravel down there doesn't, break up the landscape too much. It still fits in quite well with the tuff and the deep slate, but I think it's useful to have around.
Yeah, I like the idea of having some additional blocks, down below Y0. I also I noticed just a language shift in the article, just referring to things as height 0 as to like Y level, or because we've got a more integers going on. We've got a negative now, so like height, 30, height -30, height 0, that kind of stuff. I think it's a better way to talk about height in the game, or a Y value in the game. But yeah, there was a number of changes like that. I also, I'm sure that you're happy about the 2 to 5 copper shift.
Yes, definitely. I lament the fact that it's probably going to be happening right as my Copper King run on Empires sort of ends, because I don't think we're planning on upgrading Empires to 118 in the end. But I look forward to reprising that role in whatever worlds I end up finding. And the fact that you can get more cut copper out of a single copper block is really useful. I think copper just got a massive buff anyway, and is being made much more available in biomes like dripstone caves now as well. So yeah, there's potential for copper to really have a bit of a boom after it's been fairly difficult to get hold of in 1.17, just going mining for it. And that's effectively, encouraging people to explore more, and it takes the same approach as there being naturally generated dripstone and lush caves do, because those are resources that you also kind of had to farm in 1.17, whereas now in 1.18 you'll find a lot more ways to stumble upon it. Let's quickly go over the Bedrock beta, because I know you probably haven't spent any time really looking at this, but I briefly logged in to see what it said about my render distance, and it said that even with my PC specs, which I presume it's taking its cues from, it was still recommending that I turn the render distance down from 64 chunks, which is the default I play on, to 48. This is without RTX. RTX dramatically reduces the available render distance just because of how much extra work it's putting into the rendering. But I ignored the prompt to change the render distance, and performance was still fine. With 64 chunks, I wasn't really noticing anything getting too chuggy. But overall, I think it's a good thing the game itself is suggesting this, rather than players logging in to immediately find poor performance and having to adjust their own expectations. I think if the game sets expectations for that at first, that's a really good way of signposting that, hey, performance is going to be a little bit different to what you are used to. Aside from that, I want to give a quick thanks to Prowl8413, who's a member of our community here on Discord, but also at us on Twitter to let us know about the chunk border improvements now that they've updated the way chunk borders blend from old into new terrain, and they are looking much smoother. There's some great screenshots that Prowl shared. I think a few other people have posted these on Twitter as well. The most noticeable areas are still where there are clashes between biomes, when you've got a snowy area that kind of blends with a more neutral kind of plains biome sort of area. You'll notice there being a hard border there. And then high terrain is still a little bit sheer when it blends down into oceans, but it's looking way better either way. Like if you're blending from a fairly neutral grass color into another one, you barely notice where the chunk border is, and it's not 100 block vertical walls of stone. So it's definitely going to be an improvement over the alternative. And I'm really hoping the Java team has something similar in the works, because it's going to make things a lot smoother for everybody transitioning those old worlds to new ones.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything we can do about the chunk borders on biomes like that, like a grass biome going, or plains biome going into a snowy biome. I feel like you're gonna get some straight lines, depending on how you've done your chunk trimming. If you're bringing an old world into a new world, or if you're not trimming anything, if you're just going from chunks that you've not loaded into chunks that you have. That's why I'm thinking, more and more on the Citadel by using some of the command block teleportation that we've established on the server. It might be better to just go to a brand new area and not try to get too carried away with the chunk borders, or as you mentioned, the fact that the landscape is not so bad. Then maybe having things in chunk borders and oceans would probably be a good way to kind of hide them. If there is a biome like line, then if it's underwater, you're not going to notice it as much as you would with like a plains and a snowy biome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still leading to some quite interesting features, like Prowl noticed one where there was a geode that had generated on one of these chunk borders, and that was now melting into the ocean the way my mushroom had been in previous weeks. But yeah, I think overall it's going really well. I like the improvements they've made to that a lot. It feels a lot more natural now, and given that there are some areas where pretty sheer cliffs generate in the rest of the world anyway, it's not going to look too unnatural to have that stuff generating on the edges of your chunk borders now. Let's move on to chunk mail. Thinking of other chunky things, we've had some pretty chunky emails this week, and if you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. I'm going to read this first one that came in from Steve S. with the subject of ore generation and coal. Hi, Jonny and Joel. I've been playing the recent snapshots from time to time since the first underground caves were introduced. A problem I had then, and I still have right now, is that I can't seem to have enough coal out of everything every time. Usually, I would either go into a rather deep cave rather early on and find myself running out of torches or ending up with nothing to smelt my ores with. I can also see this becoming a problem for me in late game because I don't like dark spots in caves and would usually want to light up everything. In the massive caves, this just means an equally massive drain on torches, even with the adjustments on mob spawning light level, so eventually I would run out and would have to exit the caves early. In the 1.16 caves, I would just bring a stack of wood so that I can mine coal and make torches on the way, but with new ore generation, this just isn't possible. I don't think this is a problem players should face, at least in the late game, and I think coal should be available in some form or another in the deeper caves. For example, it could be in an ore vein much like copper and iron, with andesite as an indicator, or it could generate near diamonds since they're both made of carbon. I want to know how you guys feel about this problem. Have you been running into problems where you run out of torches? How do you deal with a new ore generation? Do you mine specifically for coal in a session and then go deep in the next session? Thank you both for the amazing podcast. Steve was blown up by a creeper he didn't see because it was too dark. Ah, those creepers.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember when I was playing with the experimental snapshots. Aside from dying too much, I wasn't really worried about coal. But if I remember the one time I did manage to go caving for any length of time, I think what I did was I chopped down a bunch of trees and I brought logs with me, and I was making charcoal.
Yeah.
Both on the surface at my little base camp, and as I was going, I would make more and more charcoal as I went to get me through. Because I did notice I didn't have like coal, certainly not the abundance of it that you have in 1.16 mining.
Yeah.
So that was how I handled it. But you have a lot more survival experience in the snapshots than I do, specifically the ones that are not experimental.
Yeah. I think Steve has kind of nailed it with a couple of the points he made in the email about basically gearing up before you go caving. Eventually, that's going to mean you run out of stuff regardless. But I do think with what they are intending to do with this update, Mojang's intention is to change our approach to caving as part of this whole add strategy to mining ethos. We've either got to gear up for long stretches in deep slate caverns, or we've got to improvise. So, like you were saying, bringing charcoal or bringing wood that you can make out of charcoal is a great thing. If you can find an abandoned mine shaft, now that they have support pillars that are made out of wood, they're made out of logs, you take down a bunch of those, you use the planks of the mine shaft to turn the logs into charcoal, and then you make more charcoal out of that. So I think that's probably your best bet if you get completely lost, is just to hope that you luck upon an abandoned mine shaft. But it is definitely a common problem I found when you need to light up those huge caverns, and especially now that the cave systems go on for, in my experience, much longer. You find you run out of torches constantly. Lighting the area up, even with, spawning prevention being taken into account, you're still going to want to light the area up. Redstone torches are even an option at that point because they will block mob spawns now. They give off light level 7, so they're effectively as good at blocking mob spawns as torches were in previous versions, because they'll give off that kind of radius. They're not as nice to see by, though. And while I have taken to punching redstone ore as I go past, because that lights up temporarily, even that's only about 60 seconds maximum before it turns off again. So I think the key really is going to be either to bring enough stuff with you that you can at least cook up a bit of charcoal if you need to, bring a couple of stacks of logs and hope, or just go mining with fortune for coal as soon as you possibly can if you're planning on going down that deep. I think our kind of emphasis in exploring the snapshots has been to go down to deep slate level as quickly as possible, because that's the new part of the game and we want to experience that. But in the course of playing a standard Minecraft world starting in 1.18, I think you're going to want to spend a lot more time delving the shallower cave layers before you go into deep slate level. So I think really it's going to be about gearing up for a big caving run, or at least knowing where your exits are if you get down into deep slate and find yourself without torches.
One of the things that I'm taking away from the ore distribution graphic that they updated this week, which is still not final, but almost, which I thought was a funny note, I would say that you want to go up before you go down.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're standing at wide 63. You're staring at the ocean and you've got mountains to one side and caves to your other side. Go left. Like go up the mountain first. Mine into the mountain first, because if you look at the graphic, there are more exposed or more coal the higher you go, up to looks like 96 or 104 as far as the height marker. If you go above 128, you're going to find even more of it, and it's going to be exposed more often, more than likely because the peaks are going to be narrower. So you're going to find more coal, and you're also going to find more iron the higher you go in the world too.
Yes.
The iron below Y64 looks to be smaller blobs. And also you have to go as far down as Y16 before you'll hit like the most important part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks to me like you might want to explore the cliffs before you explore the caves in the Caves and Cliffs update.
Yeah, I can absolutely advocate for that approach because, yes, going up into a mountain, if there is one nearby, is a really good way to get your early iron reserves. Like, if you want to grab a full suit of iron armor before you go caving, then I strongly recommend finding a mountain before you do that. And you might find a little bit of emerald ore while you're there, and you could silk touch it if you have the option. But no, I think for coal and iron, definitely go mountaineering if you have the option. And I do think now that we are used to mining with Fortune 3 for everything because of gold, iron, and copper now dropping those raw items instead of the blocks themselves, I think people are more likely to have Fortune 3 from an earlier stage of the game, in which case just go to town on any coal veins you can find. You can even store them in your inventory as coal blocks that you can break down into 9 coal later, and that way they're not going to take up stacks upon stacks of your inventory, but you'll still have a pretty healthy supply of coal when you go on that big caving run later.
Our next email comes in from Halfman7777. New mobs and some words. I was excited when Minecraft finally released their video, and then Agnes fell. Why Agnes? Hello, J&J. I was thinking of what sort of new mobs they should add to the game. Now, did you guys notice that the duo were not anywhere that looked remotely like a cliff? It kind of looked like a weird lush cave. I'm thinking that there will be at least 2 cave mobs. We do have a panda and a polar bear, but not a bear. Bears usually dwell in caves. They live off of fish and sometimes vegetation. We have fish in the game already and vegetation in caves. Glowberries come to the rescue. So I'm thinking that some sort of bear will be a mob that we can vote on. Then, tying a mob in with the cliffs part of the Caves and Cliffs, I think we really need a new flying mob. I still hate you, phantoms. So here I propose some sort of gliding mob. Something that doesn't really fly like a flying squirrel. Maybe it could be aggressive until you tame it with some sort of cliff-related item. Halfman7777 was dropped by one of those unnamed flying mobs and couldn't take out a water bucket in time. Yeah, I guess that means they're now Quarterman7777.
Possibly. Water bucket dexterity is going to be essential for 1.18, so brush up.
Good to know. I was expressing my excessive use of water buckets, waterlogging things under the river. So I've got my water logging bucket skills up to par, but my water saving bucket I've never been able to do it. I've never been able to figure it out. I can use it to climb up and down stuff like on a waterfall, but like jumping off of something 200 blocks tall and putting the water bucket down at the last minute, nope, just not a skill that I possess. I did notice that Agnes fell into a cave when she fell. If you're watching the video closely, you can see her pass through the dirt block, and you can see her fall into what looks kind of like a blue cave block.
Yeah.
Behind. It's very subtle. It's obviously meant to be how they get to the next scene. I'm assuming that she's going to be like, hey, Jens, come down. So that's probably going to be where we pick up. But thinking about a cave mob, a bear, I could see that being more of a forest mob. I don't know if they'd focus on a cave.
Yeah.
I could see them doing something about a mole or a gopher.
My first instinct was definitely mole.
We had to edit the email down for length, but they did mention something about like a digging mob, a mob that would be burrowing through things. And we talked last week about the idea of a mob like digging itself into sand for protection or hiding or springing out at the player. And I like the idea of a mole or a gopher. I think squirrel. And I think forests, and I think we already have foxes skittering around and tigers, and I think squirrels are unfortunately probably low on the totem pole because they kind of have the same vibe, bushy tail, skittering around in the woods. However, it did make me think, especially because it's fall here in my neck of the woods. And I think a lot could be added with ambient squirrel sounds in forests. Like you don't have to add the mob, but you could also just add like the sounds of squirrels and birds in forest biomes, kind of add a little bit to them. But why stop at something like a mole and a gopher when you can pull something straight out of Avatar: The Last Airbender, like a badger mole or a platypus bear? Kidding aside, I know those are really funny examples, but I think something unique in caves would be fun, like a strider, like what they did with some of the other mobs in the game. I think it could be really cool to have something. I know axolotls are real animals, but and Minecraft put their own spin on it. But I really think it would be neat. My brain is kind of stuck on the hybrid animal now, like a platypus bear. But like it would be really cool if they did something that was a little bit more whimsical, I guess, in the caves. You have an opportunity to not have it be something that already exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think I would love them to introduce more unique mobs, something that takes a bit more of a fantasy spin, something that is perhaps more unique to Minecraft as opposed to something that you can lift from other games in similar genres, right? I think obviously there's a limited amount you can pull from animals in the real world. And in previous years, they've wanted to make sure that the focus on real animals is either on domestication or conservation. So, you've got goats, you've got cows, the kind of stuff that it's okay for players to farm. And then you've got things like polar bears, which are kind of lonely and will attack you if cubs are nearby. And you've got axolotls, which are rare and you can, maybe use them in water a little bit. Then there's a few different categories of stuff, but then the neutral or more aggressive mobs are always going to be more fantastical creatures. But we don't have that many neutral or passive mobs which are fantastical creatures but don't get aggressive. So I do wonder if some kind of, like digging animal is going to encourage people to explore the caves a little bit more. I will also throw in my lot for owls as a gliding mob rather than being a squirrel kind of thing. I think owls could add a lot to ambience in the same way you're thinking of squirrels doing. With ambient sounds, they could potentially hunt rabbits for you if you're somebody who doesn't really like getting your hands dirty looking for rabbit hide for a bundle, assuming bundles are going to be in the game because they're still not enabled in the snapshots like normal. There is potential for a variety of things here. And I do like the bear idea, but I do think at this point the community has expressed a little bit of dissatisfaction with there being too many variants of other mobs. I think that was a point against the glow squid for people who voted against the glow squid last time, and it's the complaint people have had about drowned was it's another zombie variant. So I'm wondering if we need the third bear, much as the We Bare Bears fans would probably enjoy it. I do think we're going to have, potentially some more unique options coming up in this most recent mob vote. Okay, special updates. I was really hoping this was going to be the case, and it was. We have our first mob for the mob vote 2021, the Glare. There's a short video of this which we'll link in our show notes. It's on Twitter. It's probably on YouTube as well. We've just all watched it as a group here in Discord, and we want to give our first impressions. My first impression is that this looks like Oscar the Grouch has been taken out of his trash can. I like this. I like the little cartoony thing. It's unique, and from what we saw in the video, it seems to float around and lets you know when there are dark areas. So this is interesting. This actually ties into some of the mechanics they've introduced with the most recent snapshot of, torches and light levels actually fully blocking mob spawns, and so this glare floats around and shows you potentially makes grumpy noises when it's in a dark enough area for hostile mobs to spawn.
Yeah, I first thought it was a plant because I was thinking like Lush Cave. Like my brain kind of went Lush Cave, and I thought it was a plant that had like a Venus flytrap but with like eyeballs inside of it. But the fact that it floats around is neat, and I wonder if this could be something that could help players that have accessibility issues. Like if you can't see when it's dark enough in game, having an audio cue when it's dark enough in game that mobs could spawn could be very helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I'll briefly read the copy that they put on this blog post. The first couple of paragraphs are at least relevant to a description of this. Minecraft Live is fast approaching. This year's mob vote candidates are chomping at the bit. Well, I'm the one who keeps chomping at bits of sandwiches. None of the mobs have any chomping mechanics, but they all have lots of other fancy skills. And today we will be taking a closer look at the dark sourcing glare. The glare is not only super cute, but it also helps you out a lot. It hates the darkness. Who doesn't? But besides being super relatable, it will also show you areas that are dark enough for monsters to spawn. It does this by flying to dangerously dark areas and then throwing a hissy fit. With the glare by your side, you'll know that each tantrum will not only lead to me turning this car right back around, but also possibly monsters. Ah! And the vote is linked on this. The video is linked on this blog post as well, so we can probably link to that in our show notes. It occurs to me that we're potentially going to see this being used to help players torch grid in caverns. And that could be an interesting thing because this is something players have either wanted for a while in terms of a way to see where dark areas are. You find mods often assisting players with that, putting crosses on the ground where there are areas that can potentially spawn stuff. And this is a more organic way of doing that without you having to rely on something that takes you out of the immersion of the game. But it also means that you can place torches in a slightly more organic way, assisted by this thing, and it doesn't have to look quite so regimented the way you lay out your light sources. So I'm thinking potentially this has a lot of good thoughts behind it. How that works in-game obviously remains to be seen, but the movement of the thing, the design of it is pretty appealing to me. And like we've been saying in this show, very happy this is a more original monster.
Yeah, it looks like, as you said, Oscar the Grouch and Slimer from Ghostbusters kind of smashed together. What if the glare was a glow-in-the-dark mob, kind of like the glow squid? Do you think that would be helpful or cool?
It would certainly make it more visible, yeah.
And I kind of want it to drop little particles on the ground, like when lava drips from the ceiling. I kind of want little green goo drops to drop behind it so you can see where it went. That would be really cool.
You can get those green particles if you're underneath a block that a slime is on top of, but you see those so rarely because it's not that often that you encounter slimes above you in a cave. So they could reuse those particles to great effect. It looks like it's made of lettuce, and I really like that about it. So obviously we're not going to get the other two mobs until later this week, presumably Wednesday and Friday, unless they plan on releasing them on successive days, so we might get a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday release. But keep your eyes peeled. Look at Minecraft on Twitter or Minecraft on YouTube, or even follow Minecraft.net to look out for the next couple of mobs, because we don't want to cast our lot in with the glare right now. Depending on what comes next, we might have a better option. But once again, you can tune in to hear us give all of our thoughts about Minecraft Live at twitch.tv/pixelriffs on Saturday, October 16th at noon Eastern Time.
Well, speaking of options, in our main discussion this week, I thought it would be kind of a cool idea to review the mob vote, take a look back at some of the things that have been suggested over the years. The mob vote is not always, aimed at our demographic. I mean, I think it's meant for younger viewer retention and viewer engagement in terms of Minecraft Live.
Absolutely.
But if you are new to this, because we've noticed, I've noticed anyway, that there's been a fair amount of people that have been coming into the podcast community that are new to the game, relatively speaking, compared to you or I, or even some of our other members. And because their kids were into it, but this might be their first Minecraft Live. And so if we rewind the time back to 2017, there was the first mob vote. Famously, this is where we got phantoms. But there were 4 mobs, and they were mob A, B, C, and D. A was a monster of the ocean depths, something that could pull you down and drown you. Mob B was the monster of the night skies, later renamed the Phantom, which is what won the mob vote. Mob C was the Great Hunger, which we referred to on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. It's it was a swamp dwelling, looked like an alligator, but didn't have a body. It was mostly just a head. Yeah,
it was a head with legs, which was kind of adorable, but like a giant mouth that was going to eat enchantments, which eventually was something functionality that got added to the grindstone.
Yeah, and had a very Studio Ghibli feel about the whole thing. Mob D was the Hovering Inferno. Just picture a bigger blaze with shields was basically what that looked like.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the way that all broke down, there were 2,700 votes in round 1, 4,700 votes in round 2, and then 2,200 votes in round 3, with Mob A at 23%, Mob B the winner at 52%, Mob C the Great Hunger a close second at 48%, and then Mob D at 28%. So clearly it was between the Phantom and the Great Hunger as the two favorites. In 2018, there wasn't a mob vote, but there was a biome vote. And the thing I want to note here is the increase in votes. In the round one voting, it went from 2,700 votes to 56,000 votes. That's huge.
Yeah, yeah, massive turnout. I think that was also because people knew what to expect. I think initially Minecraft Live, or Minecon Live as it was back then, or even Minecon Earth, I forget what it was even called, but it was it didn't necessarily communicate that the poll was going to take place on Twitter, and so I think in 2018 people knew what to expect because it was taking the same format as previous, and that they'd communicated beforehand, you'll be able to participate in this poll via Twitter. So I think at this time, people knew where to show up, and they definitely showed up a lot more.
And so around the same amount of people voted in the second round. It was like 54,000. But out of that vote, the taiga won with 65%, and that gave us berry bushes, campfires, and foxes. Desert was last at 17%. The proposition there were palm trees and meerkats. And Savannah was 35%, which I believe would have been what you and I were gunning for back then.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that had the baobab tree, termites, and the ostrich as the mob suggested there.
Yes.
The biome vote... Sorry, go ahead.
The ostrich was really what sold me on savannas, I got to say. But I'm very happy we got the taiga because of berry bushes, campfires, and foxes. I love the foxes. I think campfires are super useful. Berry bushes I can take or leave, but I think it was ultimately a good decision by the community.
The lost my place. The biome vote in September of 2019 brought in 255,000 votes in round 1 and 228,000 votes in round 2. And you'll notice about a 14% difference there. That's because when the Badlands lost, they stopped voting.
Yeah.
So Badlands came in at 14% with tumbleweed, a new cactus, and a vulture. No one liked the vulture. I thought it was cool. The swamp was at 47% with the chest boat, the mangrove tree, and the frog. And then mountains, of course, was the winner at 53%. Not terribly far ahead of swamp. Like these winners are not like winning by landslides.
Mm-hmm.
And that was landscape changes in mountains, snowier snow, and of course the goat. In between the 2019 and 2020 votes, we had the Unpredicted Java Edition 1.15b. We didn't get a heads up about that with a vote.
Mm-hmm.
We also had the Piglins, Zoglins, and Striders come in 2020 with the 1.16 release. Again, no vote on that kind of stuff. In 2020, the mob vote was a whopping 837,000 votes in round 1 and 740,000 votes in round 2. Now, again, just 4 years earlier, 2,700 votes.
Yeah, it's gone from like, you know, the population of a small town to the population of a small country. It's like, you know, it goes through the cool 250,000 in 2019, and in 2020 it's like, yeah, we'll triple that. And that's what we got for nearly 1 million people voting in last year's mob vote is pretty intense.
Now, I didn't get quite into the weeds on this one because it's going to be fresh in our minds, just being last year. But the Moo Bloom was at 28%, the Iceologer at 34%, and the Glow Squid, of course, won at 36%. So again, Iceologer and Glow Squid, very close. And actually, Moo Bloom wasn't too far behind. It was a pretty dead race, I think, the last time. We were concerned, I think, the Moo Bloom was going to take away with it.
Yeah.
When we were watching it live, if I remember correctly. I have a hard time remembering what I had for dinner on Friday. So remembering what I was, doing during Minecraft Live last year has been challenging.
Yeah.
The thing that I find so clear about the data, which is going to be linked in our show notes. I pulled these all from the wiki page, so it's pretty easy to find. It is a huge uptick in player engagement. And I want to know if that also coincides with a popularity growth in Minecraft. Like, I know it's always been a popular game, but I want to know if the 2017 to 2020, 21 kind of run also coincides with like crazy uptick in player adoption, just like more people playing in general. I'd be curious to know if that was also a thing as well. But obviously, there's a lot of people that are engaged with the game and like the idea of being able to vote and make suggestions and see those suggestions potentially come to fruition in the game. I think the issue with this kind of thing is that Mojang there's a talented team of developers, and there are always several good ideas, ultimately leaving some players disappointed. You might really like meerkats. You might also really like foxes, but you kind of want the meerkats to win, and then the fox wins, and you're just like, well, I mean, I'm not disappointed. I like foxes, but like at the same time, I wish they would just add the meerkat. Like, why are they telling us about all these three great ideas and only adding the one instead of doing more? I think that there's also that kind of like, you don't miss what you don't know about. So take bees, for example. Almost everyone that I talk to about Minecraft loves the bees. They're not saying, the bees are okay, but I really wanted the butterfly. Because they didn't tell you they were going to add a butterfly or a bee.
Yeah,
they just added the bee. So there's a little bit of like that psychology of like the grass is greener, or if I have more than enough options, then I'm ultimately going to be, either paralyzed with choice, or I'm going to be disappointed that the one that I really want doesn't get in because other people have more options. Whereas if it's just, we made bees, they're cool, everybody's like, yay, bees, and then that's it. Now, on the other side of things, you've got the length of the development cycle, and the other biomes that they say that they want to work into the game. They never said when, but now it's been 4 years, and the cool idea of like tumbleweeds and vultures, different cactus, like some of these things don't feel like they require an entire Minecraft cycle update, right? Like you kind of feel like a new cactus could be added to the game at any point. So it starts to, the brain starts to wonder why these things haven't been added. But on the flip of that, you also have the mountains, which won the biome vote and has led to a complete overhaul of the entire game.
Yeah.
It's just like the overworld terrain generation that we're seeing now in Caves and Cliffs is a result of the mountain biome winning. I can feel that snowball, pardon the pun, rolling down the mountain at Mojang, and they realize, well, if we're going to do this, we might as well do this. And all of a sudden we're in, a 2-part update that's taken more than a year and a half to complete, which again, I think is great. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. So there are some happy, I don't want to say accidents, but there's some happy doors that are opened with the mob votes, as well as some doors that are kind of sad that they're closed, because something that I know you mentioned before on the show is that for people that don't know, in the mob A, B, C, D vote, the catch was that the mobs that did not get voted in would never be voted in. Like they're ruled out. It's not an option. Whereas they were very clear about that in the other mob votes and biome votes, is that we're not saying we'll never update the desert. We're just saying that this is the update that you would want us to do first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'm very happy that's the approach they take now, because it was a crushing disappointment to know that we were never going to get the hovering inferno, the wildfire, I think, as it became known internally. We did get a very brief Easter egg of that appearing as a statue in the nether levels of Minecraft dungeons, but that is as close as it has got to making it into actual Minecraft, which is kind of unfortunate. And like I said, some of the functionality of stuff like the Great Hunger mob can be added to villager workstations, and there are compromises. I suspect that even had the Phantom not won that vote, there would maybe be some other mechanics that they introduced later that would lead to some kind of insomnia effect, maybe like an overlay on the screen that kind of prompted players to go to sleep more frequently. And there's always going to be ways that some of that other stuff can inch its way into the game. Mob A from that vote was really just another aquatic mob, another hostile creature that was going to be like pulling players downwards as they're trying to get to the surface in oceans. And we already have stuff like the Drowned, and that was the year they announced the update Aquatics. So, it would have gone along with the theme of the update very well, but we were already getting enough with Oceans after that we were kind of happy we hadn't voted that mob in. And I do think that, going back to what you were saying before, I do think that this does coincide with, if not necessarily like an uptick in, player interest and like new people adopting Minecraft, these are definitely the updates that have really gone from strength to strength since 2017, because that was the update Aquatic, Village and Pillage, Bees and Bugs, or whatever it was called, the Buzzy Bees update, and then obviously the Nether update after that, and now Caves and Cliffs. So the team has really been cranking out some very impressive updates that I think overall the community has been super happy with, especially in retrospect. And so, yeah, I think the amount of engagement these mob votes are getting is proof that the community is solidifying around Minecraft as a game that clearly has a future, and people are really happy with the updates, and they want to see what's coming next, because each year has been building on the successes of the year before it. So I'm curious to see how many people participate in this mob vote. I expect it's probably going to be in the region of the amount of votes they got last year, if not more so. Because Caves and Cliffs has been such an energizing update for people. The second half of it is on its way. People are looking forward to that, and we're still going to be hearing about what's yet to come beyond Caves and Cliffs Part 2. So I'm hoping that the attendance is going to be really good for this one. And like you said, this kind of thing ultimately leads to somebody being disappointed, because there's a lot of thought that goes into each of the mobs. Even last year, when people thought that the Moo Bloom and the Glow Squid didn't have a great deal of information presented along with them, we later got a lot more fleshing out of the Glow Squid, and we ended up with a feature that I think is fantastic for, text glowing is such an important accessibility feature, and also just leads to better readability in general. I'm so happy that's how text is rendered in the game, and that we have the option of doing that I think it's ultimately turned out very well for the Glow Squid. The mob vote is there for a variety of reasons, I think, but the main one, like you said, is audience engagement and retention. The people who, especially younger folks who are maybe not going to want to sit through all of the devs talking about various bits and pieces that they've been working on, are going to tune back in to see, like, oh, is the mob that I like the look of going to win? So yeah, potentially it keeps the eyes on the screen for a little bit longer. And the thing that really strikes me this year is how short notice that the mob choices have been presented to us. Like I said, like we're recording this 5 or 6 days before Minecraft Live happens, and at the time of this recording, at this point, we still don't know what any of the mobs are. And so I'm wondering if the short notice is aimed at preventing people arguing over this for a while, and kind of like the piling on each other's communities about like who's voting for what, and the kind of antagonistic relationship that some people seem to have about like which mob is going to win. And it's all in good fun ultimately, but yes, there are definitely people who think phantoms were a mistake and we should never have voted for them. With 4 years worth of hindsight, it's easy enough to say that. I think whatever ends up being the spread of mobs this year, I'm hopeful that whatever it is, it's going to end up being a good contribution to the game.
Yeah, I think posting the options closer to the announcement kind of keeps the division among the community, or the piling on, a little bit on the lower side. I also feel like, because of the vagueness of the announcement videos, and the kind of lateness of it all, I'm kind of setting my expectations low for Minecraft Live. I'm feeling a lot of buzz around like the end update, just anecdotally in my own communities and stuff. And as the 1.19 announcement kind of comes close, I think players should rein those expectations in for both the announcement and the mob vote. I'm going to be happy to be proven wrong, but I'm just getting this gut feeling that while I want a platypus bear, I'm expecting a cave spider variant, for at least one of the mob options. Like I'm not expecting anything that's really going to be stretching what we know and have seen from Minecraft Live before.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think people get very very excited about this stuff, and I do kind of wonder that there is potential for it to include the caves as part of it. Like I think our instincts responding to the email earlier were kind of close in that it's going to be up until 1.19 we're not going to see whatever the result of this mob vote is, and if it turns out to be as monumental as the biome vote for mountains was, we're not going to see that for a while because it could potentially lead to them deciding that something needs to change about the game. We could end up with them reconsidering how this mob should balance into mob spawning, and then have them overhaul mob spawning in ways we've seen them experimenting with in the experimental snapshots. But it can have that kind of knock-on butterfly effect for the game, or it can just be something relatively kind of, something that we've seen before. In the last year's mob vote, they did pull each of the contestants, if you want to call them that, from other Minecraft games. There was the Isolager from Minecraft Dungeons, the other two were from Minecraft Earth, and they were variants of existing mobs. Basically, it was a variant cow and a variant squid. So they still have a wide library of those mobs to pull from, and there is the potential for other stuff from Minecraft Earth to be brought in, other stuff from Minecraft Dungeons to be brought in. Maybe that's alongside a new original creation or an animal that's never been seen in Minecraft before, but I do think people should keep their expectations low and be surprised instead of setting your expectations high and being disappointed. I feel like you can take some positivity away from it at that stage. And yeah, I think the same approach can really be taken about the theme of this update, because I think people are expecting a lot after the Nether and the Overworld have had such massive updates. But if anything, the fact that they had to split this update and they were talking about the team's health and making sure they didn't crunch on developing caves and cliffs has made me think I expect the next update is going to be smaller. I don't expect it to be something as big as, say, an overhaul of the outer end biomes, because I don't expect they'll want to update all three of the dimensions in such quick succession. Like you, I'm happy to be proved wrong, but it'd be a lot of work to follow those up, and I think the team is going to want to pace themselves given what they've learned from developing caves and cliffs.
I think, too, that, and this is pure speculation, that an update to the end is certainly probably happening. It's just not going to be announced. If it's happening, it's percolating in the background because it's going to require that kind of time. It's going to require that kind of feedback from the community on how technically Caves and Cliffs lands. Like, I think Caves and Cliffs has to land before a decision could be made about something as wide and as huge as an end update, right? And so I'm with you. I think that also from team health perspective and stuff like that. And to be very clear, happy with any update. Like it just moving a game forward that I paid $30 for 6 years ago. I can't remember how long it's been. Like that to me, like it's just, I don't want to sound like I'm an ungrateful player. I think that the bees update was, okay, it's bees. And then after a while, we're like, oh, wow, okay, there's honey blocks. There's a lot more to that than we thought. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of middle of the road, idea that they have. I don't know what that is. I'm going to be pleasantly surprised. But like, I'm looking forward to whatever it is. I'm always curious, and having, been more involved with the Minecraft community, of course, since I started the podcast with you, I find that I'm more intrigued by game development and like what decisions are made and why. And I'm looking forward to the announcement on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. I'm crossing my fingers for it to be something big, but also, big within reason, is kind of the mantra, I think, right now. And we could be seeing something, to do with archaeology. We could be seeing something to do with existing generated structures, building on some of the stuff that we've seen in caves and cliffs by introducing new biomes to the underground. There are a few different options there, or it could be something a little smaller, like the bees update, where we get a few more technical things, a bit more of a focus on version parity between Java and Bedrock, but also a couple of key features that, turn out to be really useful, especially as the game continues to grow. And it will be. So excited to see what they've got in store for us. It's really hard to believe that this is the last show we're doing before we will know about all of that, but believe me, next week's episode is going to be pretty action-packed if they announce anything at all, which we're pretty certain they're going to, judging by the amount of pre-announcements videos they've been making. But for now, that's going to be it from this episode of The Spawn Chunks. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you all enjoy Minecraft Live. And once again, a quick reminder that we will be streaming Minecraft Live and restreaming it and giving our first impressions of all of the announcements. At the same time that Minecraft Live goes live, we'll be going live over on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/pixelriffs, at noon Eastern Time, Saturday, October 16th. So drop a follow if you want to get notified of that happening. And in the meantime, you can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, please consider putting some value back in. You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can chat to people in the community, listen to the show live as it is recorded, and you get us closer to our next milestone goal of having a monthly Minecraft audio hangout with our listeners. We're currently at 296 patrons. Would love it if we could hit 300 at some point this month. We are definitely up 5 from last week, so it could happen. And special thanks go to our content engineers, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, and Yitz for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram. Personal recommendations are by far the best way, though. Just tell a friend about The Spawn Chunks and that they can listen to it on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or YouTube, really wherever they can find a podcast. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Please use that email address. The RSS feed is linked at thespawnchunks.com. And the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where my Empire's SMP and Hardcore Survival Guide series are currently ongoing. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, doing behind-the-scenes work for the aforementioned YouTube series, and I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything I am up to online, including my illustration and design portfolio, is at joelduggan.com. You can listen to the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment, at thecitadelcafe.com. I'm going to be talking with, I believe, Lou this week about Black Widow, which is on Disney+, and whatever Lou's been watching. We don't know yet. You can follow me at Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I have been dividing my time between Satisfactory and Minecraft, both of which are having announcement updates this month. So it's an exciting time.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, yet Minecraft Live is so close.